good day and welcome back to Tech Tips, Fixes and More. My name is Ron. Now, I'm an electronics guy primarily, but as you know, I do fixes on whatever comes along, whether it's household kind of stuff or just things that friends bring me to fix. And a while back, actually going back several months, somebody brought me a table to do some fixing on. And this table is essentially antique, and it was kind of falling apart. It needed some work, and it also needed to be raised up a little bit higher because the original casters were gone. Now, I'm not really a woodworker, and I'm certainly not a furniture fixer, and so I did the fix, and it turned out okay. And in the following days, when I went to actually look at the footage that I had taken of it, I couldn't find it. It got mixed up with some other stuff and went missing for several months, and I just found it the other day. So I thought, should I still do this? And when I looked at the footage, I realized that since then I've learned quite a few things about working with wood and a few things about fixing furniture because I've been watching some channels on YouTube that were involved in that. And there's one in particular called Fixing Furniture, and this guy really knows his stuff, and I realized that several of the things that I did on this table were really not correct. They were not the right way to fix these things. So then I was kind of wondering, well, should I even put this video out? So I guess this video is going to be kind of like a fixing video where you will learn some things you can do and probably learn some things you shouldn't do, and I'll try and point those out as I get to them in the video. And hey, we can learn from our mistakes, we can learn as we go, and maybe you'll find something interesting in this, so stay tuned. Okay, so here's the table base that I'm working on. This base is actually probably an antique and was purchased used, obviously, from somebody that was trying to get rid of it, and it never really was very stable. Things were quite loose. The tabletop was loose, and so the owner wanted to just try and tighten them up. And so I took the tabletop off, and it looks to be in pretty good shape, but the base here has got a few problems, and so I'm just going to do some things to tighten it up. You'll notice here that this top is kind of wiggly, and when you've got a table with a insert in it, when you put the tabletop on with an insert in it, that little bit of wiggling turns out to be quite a bit of wiggling at the end, at each end, and then the bolts that go through these slots to hold the tabletop on, they weren't tightened down very well. So there's that, and then there's a couple of other things. Here it is on its side, and you can see where someone has put some pieces of galvanized metal on there to try and hold these legs stable, and they're just not stable. And if you look inside, there's bolts that are supposed to hold that tight, and I think they need to be at the very least tightened up. So I'm going to tighten those up, and then I may still use these little galvanized steel braces, but they just use nails in them, whereas screws would have been a lot more stable and strong. So I'm going to do that. And then we've got a little crack here that needs to be tightened up, and when I'm done with all of that, this table at one time had casters on it, and they were taken off. Those old casters were pretty bad, and they're hard on the floor, and so the table's kind of low because of that. And I've got some little blocks that I'm going to put on there to increase the height of the table by about an inch or maybe an inch and a half. So I think I'll start by tightening up those bolts inside. To the wooden sides, I think I'm still going to replace some of these nails in here with screws. I think that will add some stability. So this is probably the first spot where I was doing the wrong thing. I'm pretty sure that a professional furniture fixer would not be using these little pieces of galvanized metal to hold this thing together. Probably wouldn't be using any kind of metal, but I have to say I don't know exactly what he would do to add stability to these legs. Maybe there's a whole different way of doing it. Okay, I would say those are pretty stable. Now I'm going to see if I can fix these sides here, where the cracks, where the thing's coming apart. You have to glue and clamp them as well. Okay, I'm going to try to force some glue into these cracks and see if I can then clamp them up. So what I've learned since then is that when you're using carpenter's glue like this, the two pieces of wood need to be clamped together very tightly in order for it to work. If there's a void, it's not going to work. And I should have checked to make sure that these two pieces of wood would clamp together. As you'll see in a minute here, the wood was warped, it appears, and those pieces were not able to be clamped together as tightly as they should be. I've also learned that if you can't do that, if you can't get those pieces together, you should probably use epoxy or something that will actually fill the gap, and then you have to look after making sure that it looks good after the fact. This one isn't pulling in that well. I'm not sure why. This has got an old flathead screw in it. It's very, very tight. It does not want to come out. And it does not want to go back in either. I don't really want to have a bunch of screw holes all over the place in this thing, but I guess I might as well let you see what I'm doing. I find that sometimes I like using drywall screws for a thing like this because they have much bigger threads. I don't think that worked either. So that is just not moving. Okay, so I'm just going to get this tightened up so that the glue, at least on the other side, will start to harden. And then I better do something about this side here. I'm going to take a little L-shaped metal bracket and put it on down here. This other side is not clamping very well at all either, but I'm going to try and get some glue in there, then clamp it, and then put on that bracket. It just appears that the boards in this thing are so old and dry and have been forced into a certain position for so long that they're just not really, that there's some warpage that's happened in here. So let's see if I can't make it a little better. I don't think I'm going to get it actually right, but maybe a bit better than it was. Okay, that might be the best that can be done for that part. I do have some wood filler that I could use on this later to fill some cracks. It's probably the best I can do for it. One bolt that comes down the middle that holds the top on, and it's not even finger tight. So the other end of this bolt is a carriage bolt head, and then the nut is in here. If that will tighten.
The bolt holding the top on was a carriage bolt, and it had this old-fashioned square nut on it. It didn't have a very big washer, so I got a hex nut and replaced it and added a washer.
It's got a carriage bolt head on it, but there's nothing to hold it. I'll have to try the old vice grip trick on it, see if I can get a good enough purchase on it to hold it while I tighten it. The threads are all jimmied up on the end of this bolt. I'm probably going to have to get up my tap and die set.
If I'm making a whole new set of threads or not here. I'm going to turn this around, so some screws in the top here that were not tight. Okay, that screw is stripped in that hole. That this is not a new trick to you, but people have done this kind of thing before, but this is just a set of old chopsticks. I'm just going to drive them into that hole, break it off, and then I'm going to put that screw back in, hopefully. I don't like these slotted head screws. I hate them, in fact. They're terrible. I can remember my dad, probably 50 or 60 years ago, talking just like I am now about slot head screws. And if you're watching this from outside of Canada, you may not be familiar with Robertson screws. Robertson screws are the square head type of screws, like that. They're a Canadian invention, and they're a much better solution. Oh, and that's tight now. I'm going to be hard pressed to get that in there, actually. Maybe we'll use a bigger screwdriver that we can get a little better purchase on. Wow. So the last thing I have to do on this is raise it up a little bit. So I've got a couple of circular feet that I'm going to try and adapt onto this, and we'll see if we can make it a little bit taller, this table. I don't know if this is the best way to do it, but this is what we have, so that thing's a little over 2 inches. Maybe I'll countersink these. So that first foot I put on there, I tightened it too quickly and too hard, and it broke. So I had to glue it. Which is disappointing, but I guess it shows me I have to be more careful. These aren't really the best piece to put on there, I guess, because they're actually not made for this, and they're hollowed out on the inside, makes them weaker. It'd be nice if they were just kind of a hockey puck circular piece of wood, but this is what
I was given, so I'm going to try and make it work. Screws I'm using here are actually deck screws. I'm just using those because they happen to be the right length, and I have them. Try and do the rest of these a little more carefully than I did that first one. Do the last little bit of tightening by hand.
So once I had the wooden feet on the table, the pretty much final step was to add these felt pads on the bottom. Now those tend to usually come with double-sided tape on them, and sometimes that tape isn't that good. And so I decided to use alien tape to hold those on the bottom, and that's what I'm applying right now. If you haven't tried alien tape, I can kind of recommend it. It's a little bit tricky to play around with. It's double-sided clear tape, and it sticks to just about anything, and it does a really good job. They say that you can reuse it, but I haven't had very good success with that. You have to keep it in a plastic bag so it doesn't dry out, but it does really stick well, and it's fairly difficult to get things off afterwards. So that's what I use to put these pads on. Okay, so this is how the pads I put on the bottom of those legs looked once I had them attached. And after that, I did some cleaning up of the scratches and gouges in the wood. Unfortunately, some of that video got lost somewhere along the line, and I'm sorry I don't have that to show you. But I was able to use some of these touch-up markers to just fix some of the little scratches and gouges in the legs. And then in some of the places where there were cracks or gaps in things, I used some of these very small fill sticks, and they work really good. You can, in some cases, use them just by pressing them into the cracks, or in other cases you can melt them into the cracks with a soldering iron, and that works pretty good. So that's what I used for the final steps, and this is what it looked like in the end, the table back in place with the tabletop on it. So although I made some mistakes and I didn't manage to close up some of the gaps here and there, in the end the table actually was in pretty good shape. It looked decent. It was much more stable, less wiggly and creaky, and very, very usable. So the person that owns it seems to be pretty happy with it, and I'm chalking this up to a success. So I guess that kind of wraps it up for this one. Thank you for being here with me on this particular project, a little different than some of the ones I've done in the past, but very enjoyable to work with wood sometimes, and there's a lot to learn, and I think we'll call that a wrap. So thanks again for being with me. Appreciate any likes or comments that you might like to make, and we will see you on the next one.